Who are you?
Who am I?
Mm-hmm.
That's a very good question. I'm Dawn Epstein, and I'm the founder of Blue Cormorant. We're a collaborative filmmaking studio, primarily working on animation and narrative fiction.
And where are you based?
Based in Gloucester, Massachusetts, and also work out of Rockport.
So working backwards, we know you're in film now. What have you done? Starting now, going backwards.
Starting now, going backward.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm working on a film with Henry Farini on Lester Young through animation. And then, before that, I did a lot of work with Anthem Multimedia, animating things for the biotech industry, doing a lot of little graphics and things for training videos. And before that, I did a number of little narrative fiction films. I'm a recent graduate from Harvard. I managed to squeak that in before I turned 60, so I graduated in the Film and Visual Studies program at Harvard Extension. And before that, I was I was a landscape designer, and I went to the Landscape Institute. And before that, I was a furniture maker, and I did that for a whole bunch of years. And then before that, I worked in software. So I worked at Atria and did software for developers. I worked at Lotus Development and wrote a graphics layer that pretty much all the software went through. And before that, I worked for a company that made digital video boards before we even knew what digital video really was going to be when it grew up. And before that, I was a video game programmer. And before that, I worked on a system that automated high vacuum equipment for the plasma etcher for the semiconductor industry. And before that, I automated printers for Centronics. I wrote firmware for printers and wrote character sets and one of their first graphics printers. And before that, I was a stringer for the Manchester Union Leader, and also worked nights at a professional photographer's lab, so I was a midnight lab rat, and also worked in a camera store. And before that, I was in high school.
What brought you into the game developing world?
I saw an ad in the Boston Globe looking for people who wrote assembly language and were comfortable with hardware control. And that was me. It was me right, straight through professionally. That's what I did. But it was Parker Brothers, and I went home and looked at my game cabinet and discovered that all of the games, all of them, were Parker Brothers. Well, except for Life, which was, I think, Milton Bradley at the time. I got very excited at the very prospect, so I went on the interview, and they invited me in, and I was hired onto the team as the second female programmer in the group.
Did you struggle with anything in your entry into the company?
Yeah. The manager of the program asked me if I had ever, if I knew how to knit. So the interview asked, do you know how to knit? And I took offense. Do you ask the guys if they know how to knit? Well, the answer is yes, he did, actually. And the reason, it turns out he had a really good reason for that. The reason was that he wanted to know if I could take an image and decompose it into pixels, into little units, so like stitches in knitting. And he also saw knitting as the ultimate programming language. It was a debate whether it was knitting or whether it was music, but I was interested in both, and so I passed the test after I bit my tongue for a little bit about feeling like he was dissing me because I was female by asking if I knew how to knit.
What did you do at Parker Brothers?
Well, they gave me they gave all of us licenses, and they gave me the Strawberry Shortcake license. So I got to design the first game for 4 to 8 year old girls using Strawberry Shortcake. And so I created the game called Strawberry Shortcake Musical Matchups and did that for the Atari VCS or 2600 and also for Intellivision.
As a woman in that field early on, what were your struggles, if any?
Well, before I got to Parker Brothers, there were quite a few struggles. And there was certainly glass ceiling even there. Before Parker Brothers, when I was at a company called Balzers, the high vacuum company, that company was owned by Liechtenstein Company, and in Liechtenstein at the time, women didn't have the vote, so they didn't really let it be known that I was a woman working on the project. So whenever the Prince of Liechtenstein came to visit the company, I wasn't there. I was given the day off. And all the communications from me back to the home company were always spelled D-O-N. So, it's one small thing. When I was at Centronics, it was actually flat out, sexual intimidation, people, unwanted touch, outright contempt, being called things like a baby machine and that sort of thing, and told that I should go home and leave the field to a man so a man could have the job and take care of his family, and that I was not welcome.
And what would your take be on the current struggles of women in the programming industry, whether it's game developing or just any software developing?
Well, I think in the whole gamer attitude is really hostile to women. And I find that problematic because it shuts out some really great minds and some really wonderful gamers from just a free and exciting experience. I think back on how we felt and how we worked together at Parker Brothers and how joyful that was, how supportive everyone was, and how much they enjoyed each other's company. It was just all the boats rose. Everyone was celebrated, and we're missing that. We're missing that, and I think that women are not enjoying STEM careers, partly because we don't add the A and get the arts in there and enjoy them as whole-bodied humans, but also because people with female bodies are not as welcome, and we're assumed to be not as viable as employees and colleagues even. So there's still a great deal of hostility and quite a lot of bro culture, and so it doesn't have to be that way.
Is there anything you would say to younger women or college-age women who are looking to go into a STEM major or a game developing major?
The thing that I feel is strongly about is to invest in design skills and things that help you think, things that help you tell your story, things that help you figure out what your questions are and how to approach them and how to learn. And yes, you need to know programming languages, and yes, you need to know computer science. But you will have to change everything that you've learned in 5 years. Everything you learn now, you're going to have to change in 5 years. So concentrating on being expert at a particular language, that's something you can do on your own time, and you have to be able to adapt to new languages all the time. What you really want to know is how languages are developed and why, how problems are solved and why. And when you look at my career, it sounds like it's absolutely crazy and chaotic. Doesn't it? I mean, it just looks like what you can just keep changing. The one constant through that whole thing is design and graphics. Even woodworking was about designing furniture and the graphics of the wood and the electronics that I used to visualize or pre-visualize the thing I was about to build. So I never left my camera behind, and I never left my computer behind. Not in landscape, not in wetlands preservation, not flying a drone around. Even when I'm working with my pens here, I'm still also pre-visualizing in electronics. You can make any major into the kind of life that you want to live. It's follow the thing that is, helps you be your best and strongest self, that you pick things that are hard and you're curious about, and have the grit to stick with whatever it is until you milk it for all it's worth.
I guess the most important question of all, who am I to you?
Who are you to me?
Mm-hmm.
You are a miracle and my most precious gift to the world. I dare you to use that.